Kamala Harris has just proposed a $100 billion bill on her campaign to help improve black home ownership and the wealth disparity that exists here in America. Similarly, Elizabeth Warren has just proposed an executive order that she will put in place if elected president to help eliminate the wage gap between genders. We also have numbers on Sunday talk shows and how their ratings are faltering and falling from NBC, ABC, and CBS. We'll have those numbers coming up. And also, a festival charged double price in downtown Detroit. They charged double price for non-colored people as they did for colored people. We have this and much more coming up on this edition of the WireTap. Hello everyone, my name is JD.
And this is Logan.
And this is the Conservative WireTap Podcast. We want to thank you for coming back for another episode today. And what we have, I'm going to start this just first off. Kamala Harris, this is from CNN. She unveils a $100 billion black homeownership plan. That is the headline. And in details, it says California Senator Kamala Harris unveiled a $100 billion plan to invest in black home ownership, a proposal the 2020 presidential candidate said that, if elected, would set in motion her broader plan to tackle the U.S. racial wealth gap. So we must right the wrong, and after generations of discrimination, give black families a real shot at home ownership, historically one of the most powerful drivers of wealth, she said in a speech on Saturday at the Essence Festival in New Orleans. And she goes on, and under her proposal, home buyers who rent or live in historically redlined communities, which redlining is it's discriminatory housing practices in terms of artificially and arbitrarily raising rates for, colored and minority people instead of white people. That kind of stuff. It's just discriminatory housing practices. Historically, redline communities can apply for a federal grant of up to $25,000 to assist with down payments or closing costs. Harris's campaign estimates that this will help up to 4 million families. So, her policy proposal also aims to prevent discrimination in home sales, rentals, and loans by promising to strengthen and strictly enforce anti-discrimination laws. When our kids want to go to college, whereas other families who own their home and can go into the equity in their home to help pay for their students' tuition, our families have to go, and those students have to take out loans and at interest rates they can't afford to pay off over a long period of time, Harris said. So, what this does, and what this is this is part of a larger ideology and a larger mindset of systemic racism and discrimination in America that goes to its very core. It is in every corner of American life, and every corner is permeated with this racism and this discrimination. And if you don't believe me, watch the headlines, watch the news pages, the home pages of sites like CNN, the New York Times, the Washington Post. Watch them for a period of not even a month. You could probably do it for just 2 weeks. And you will see, between those three sources, story after story of just the most banal things that you can think of, just the most trite things that we take for granted in life, and it is somehow a racial catastrophe. White people enjoy ice cream more than black people. Why? Because of racial discrimination. Because ice cream trucks only go to white neighborhoods. You know?
Well, they're trying to create, I guess, affordable housing. Is that what this entire thing is?
Well, what it is it's just, we've
made Department of Urban Development.
Yeah,
we have housing.
We've already kind of done this, but this is for black home ownership, which I guess the difference there would just be black housing in general, to where it would maybe not per se be owned, it would be rented. So the idea here is to increase and arbitrarily inflate black home ownership by means of a $100 billion government program to hand up to $25,000 out to people to help with home ownership. Which it comes from this assumption, and it comes from the assumption that it's race-based. It doesn't take into account anything else that could possibly be the reason as to why maybe black people do not own homes nearly as much as white people. About 3/4 of white people in America own a home. It's a little less than 75%. I think it's like 73 or 74%. Basically, 3/4 of all white people in America own a home. In the African American community, that number hovers between 43 to 45, I believe. So less than half of them own a home. But of course, this has to be because of discriminatory housing practices, which we already have the Fair Housing Act and all that kind of stuff, which prevents the redlining practices that they describe. But whenever they talk about these things, there's the new redlining, modern day redlining. Redlining has taken new faces. It's put on a new mask, but it's really just the same old evil that we've been dealing with for decades, and it doesn't take into account any other sort of factors. And they do this with virtually everything. They do this with everything. In terms of society in general, just anything in society that used to be an issue is still an issue in their eyes. And it is still an epidemic. And in this case, virtually every article that's talked about this speaks to the fact that black home ownership is the lowest that it's been since the Fair Housing Act was passed, in the 60s with LBJ and the Great Society and all that stuff. Since that Fair Housing Act has been passed in the 60s, black home ownership is at the lowest levels that it's ever been, because racism is worse than it's ever been before. Because why? Because Donald Trump is in the White House.
Well, you look at this bill, and my only analysis of it is that it's a stupid bill. But looking at why she made it and why she wanted it, Joe Biden right now is it's leading in the polls for black votes. She needs black votes, and right now Joe Biden, even after her attacks at the first debate, still has the largest threshold of
it's an absolute joke of a bill. Let's just ask the simple question here of how do you pay for this? Which we all know what the answer would be, is to just tax the rich.
That 1% is going to pay for everything.
I don't know, where you pull $100 billion out of your butt from. You can't fork over, what was it, $5 billion for the wall? Mm-hmm. Wasn't it $5 billion for the wall? You can't fork that over, but somehow we're going to be able to generate $100 billion to give up to 4 million black families $25,000 each to assist in home ownership.
Maybe if Trump raised the price of the wall, it could be passed.
And this is from valuepenguin.com, and this is just very basic stuff, just very basic Google searching that you can do and that you can look at. But let's just evaluate one of the biggest factors whenever it comes to home ownership, and that is getting a home loan. And what is a loan based off of? A huge factor in your loan being based off of, in terms of your in terms of you getting the loan or being denied the loan, it's your credit score. And according to Value Penguin and their statistics, and they get this from the 2010 Federal Reserve survey that they did, but listen to this. Asians, their average credit score is 745.
Dang.
Hispanic whites is 701. Non-Hispanic whites is 734. Black or African American is 677. The average across the board is 728. And African Americans had a 677. I mean, that's not great. That's 51 points lower.
Yep.
And whites have just over 6 points over that. In terms of their survey that they did, whites have about a 6-point advantage just over the average. And African Americans are 51 points below that in terms of their credit scores. And, you wonder, well, why is that? And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out why. It really doesn't take much hard thought whenever you look at the numbers of unemployment for blacks historically. Even though that by every indication they're much better now than they have been in years in terms of black employment and their unemployment numbers. It's much better than it's been in years. And a caveat for those numbers is that although that black unemployment is quite low, you also have to look at the other side of the coin and think, well, what kind of jobs are they getting? Because whenever you look at their graduation rates, which are far lower than any other racial group in the United States, it's lower than whites and Asians and Hispanics, all these minority groups, African Americans are at the lowest of high school graduation rates, which our high school graduation rates in America are not great either, just as a whole. And African Americans are even lower than that. And then the number of them who are actually able to go to college, be interesting. We would have to pull this up and refer to this in a future episode as to how many African Americans are actually able to go to college, for one, and how many of them actually are able to acquire academic scholarships to pay for their college as compared to athletic. Because for a lot of the African American community, athletics is their gateway into college, not academics. Athletics most of the time is how they're able to pay for this kind of stuff.
What a stereotypical assumption.
Well, but without those scholarships, they wouldn't be able to go. I wouldn't be able to go to college without scholarships. But they're also a lot lower income on average than white families. And this is a quote from Nicholas Eberstadt. This comes from the Lubbock Avalanche Journal from Texas. And it's talking about LBJ and the Great Society. And this is something that they mention in this article. It says 29% of Americans, about 47% of blacks, and 48% of Hispanics live in households receiving means-tested benefits, meaning, welfare benefits. 47% of blacks and 48% of Hispanics. So basically half of their community, whenever across all America, it's just 29%. I mean, that's a lot. That is significant. Whenever you look at it in retrospect, you say, oh, it's less than half. But having half of your community be on these programs and have this assistance is big. It affects your community and it affects your culture. It goes on, and it says that out of wedlock births increased from 7.7% in 1965 to more than 40% in 2012, including 72% of black babies. Which that is another thing. The family, we've seen this countless times in countless studies, that the black family is largely being eroded and destroyed. Divorce rates and out of wedlock births, everything like that, which is another financial burden, unless you go the abortion route, which abortion is another thing that Hispanics and African Americans are far more likely to choose than whites.
I forget the rates.
I can't remember the rate of, if abortion were not legal, how many more black people would be alive in America today than there are now. And I mean, it is actually tens of millions. I'm wanting to say that it's over 20 million since Roe versus Wade that have been killed, that would be alive today. And I think that's just in the state of New York alone, if I remember right. I would have to pull that up. But I believe that in the state of New York alone, there would be over 20 million more African Americans alive from the time Roe versus Wade passed to today than there are because of abortion. And all these things contribute to what Kamala Harris wants to try to fix with this $100 billion bill for black home ownership, to try to decrease the wealth disparity in America. And it's really just indicative and reflective of how they actually think of you, an American, of you, the American people, that without the government, with their thumbs on you, you are just systemically programmed to discriminate against people of color in every aspect of life.
It's born into you.
It's born into you. It's bred into your DNA. And that the only thing that you know outside of the government passing laws to prevent you is discriminating against you, against minorities in terms of their housing or their wages or, whatever it may be. Police pulling them over more often for traffic stops. Just whatever it is. Higher rates of prosecution. Whatever it may be. That's what they believe about you. They truly believe, and they show it in their proposals. They show it as they're going along right now, vying for their votes for the primary, as they gear up to face Donald Trump in the presidential election. They're showing their true colors and their true opinions through their policies and their ideas about what you are as an American.
That's all.
About how you are as the American people. And Kamala Harris, what we're seeing is, between the thing with Joe Biden about segregationists, which he's come out and I think he's apologized for.
He finally did.
after
this
a
past
long time.
weekend, I think he finally broke down to the pressure and did.
I think that he finally came out and apologized for it. At first, he was not going to. He said, apologize for what? That he had nothing to apologize for. And
credit to him for doing that.
Credit to him for actually taking a stand.
It just wasn't going away.
On an attack that was just kind of dumb. I mean, anybody who
has a cognitive
who has cognitive ability can see what he meant. I mean, of course, it's good old middle class Gumbo Joe, so he isn't the most eloquent speaker, but you can see what his point was, and he got eaten alive by his own side. Joe Biden does not belong in the Democrat Party anymore, which is amazing because he was vice president 4 years ago. He was the vice president 4 years ago, and he already does not belong. I'll be totally honest. I don't know how he was Barack Obama's vice president. I'm not going to lie. I don't know why he was or how it came about. I've never really thought about it, to be totally honest. But Joe Biden does not belong in the Democrat Party.
Sure.
Bill Clinton does not belong in the Democrat Party, even though his wife, Hillary Clinton, ran for president in the last election 3 years ago. And Bill Clinton does not belong in the Democrat Party anymore. He doesn't have a place.
Did Bill ever really have a place?
Moderate Democrats are totally gone from the Democrat Party. And it's kind of interesting how each election cycle you'll have like one run for president. Just like one. And they're not even that good. I mean, they're not even good at what they do. Last time it was, we just looked this up the other day.
Oh, darn it.
Can't remember his name from the last election cycle. But what you're seeing here from Kamala Harris between the segregationist thing with Joe Biden and now with this is that, yes, as you said, she's obviously vying for the African American vote. She's obviously vying for that community back, which Donald Trump, as a Republican, saw unheard of numbers from a Republican in the election returns in 2016. He had the highest vote for blacks. I don't know at how long. It might be ever. If we're being honest.
It was incredibly high.
I mean, it was incredibly high for what you normally see from Republicans nationwide. And
you even saw it in Latino votes as well.
Yes.
And the Democratic Party knows they can't win without the minority communities.
Mm-hmm.
And they're slowly losing that, and now you're seeing them make reparations talks in all these bills.
Yeah, they're talking about reparations, and this is just another thing that will pull the minority community back into the fold with the Democrat Party. Because I guarantee you that it will not just be black homeownership, because Hispanic homeownership is lower than that of whites as well. So I'm sure that it will also eventually morph into where Hispanics can be thrown under a bill like this, or put, as an addendum to this as well. But it is just another thing for them to ensure that minorities are in their fold and on their voter rolls.
Without a doubt.
It's not out of genuine kindness. It's not
pandering.
Out of anything. It's pandering to try to get back the vote that they lost in 2016. I will be very interested to see how well Donald Trump does in 2020 with the black and minority community, given what we've seen nationwide in terms of their economic status improving at a better and faster rate than any time under Obama, whenever he himself he was the first African American president that America's ever had. So this is a story from Sky News, and the headline is, Festival charges double ticket price for non-people of color. So a music and arts festival in Detroit is charging fans different prices depending on their skin color. So this is called Afro Future Fest, and it's set for the 3rd to 4th of August. And what they're doing is they're charging lower rates for tickets bought by people of color than for non-people of color. Early bird tickets for POC, people of color, were $10 and $20 for non-POC. There were also some POC tickets which were free, but they have now sold out. Later date pricing offers for POC tickets for $20 and non-POC tickets for $40. So as of right now, your early bird tickets are $10 and $20. Later on, the racial disparity gap between your two tickets doubles from just $10 to $20, as people of color can get their tickets for $20. White people can get them for $40. So
what is Afro Future Festival?
I really don't know, but the website of this event has a frequently asked questions section on their website, and it actually had, why do we have people of color and non-people of color tickets? I'm glad you asked. Equality means treating everyone the same. Then why are your tickets different? Why are your tickets priced different? You just said equality means treating everyone the same, which is true. Then why are your tickets priced different? But they go on to explain, equity is ensuring everyone has what they need to be successful. Our ticket structure was built to ensure that the most marginalized communities are provided with an equitable chance at enjoying events in their own community. In parentheses, Black Detroit. Tiny Jag, a biracial rapper based in Detroit, has quit the event and insisted Afro Future Fest remove her name from all promotional material. So this is what she said to the Detroit Metro Times. I was immediately outraged just because I am biracial. I have family members that would have, under those circumstances, been subjected to something that I would never ever want them to be in, especially not because of anything that I have going on. Tiny Jag also said of the ticketing policy, it's non-progressive and it's not solution-focused in my eyes. It seems almost like it has spite, and unfortunately with spite comes hate, and that's just not obviously going to be a good direction for us to go if we're looking for positive change.
I think you're going to enjoy this. I found the description of the events: activating the land with eyes to open metaphysical travel, a home for arts, healing, and adornment activations, featuring a day parade, drum circle, and bonfire to awaken space spirits. In co-creation with community leaders, youth will start the day by restoring resilience and reimagining stability. Day 2 is even better, because that gets immersive and space keeping for Afro-Black futurists, including Detroit's Black Magic performers.
Okay. The legality of Afrofuture's ticket policy is believed to be questionable. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title II states, all persons shall be entitled to the full and equal enjoyment of the goods, services, facilities, and privileges, advantages, and accommodations of any place of public accommodation as defined in this section without discrimination or segregation on the ground of race, color, religion, or national origin. The section describes places of public accommodation to include any motion picture house, theater, concert hall, sports arena, stadium, or other place of exhibition or entertainment. So based off of that, it really absolutely should not be legal to be able to do that. And any ethical person knows that this is obviously not right, and it's wrong for people to do this. But in the name of equality, which means treating everyone the same, white people, if you get your early bird tickets, have to pay $20. Black people can pay $10, but late price tickets are $20 for black people and $40 for white people. In the name of equality, to help less privilege.
This whole festival must be atonement, because as I just read, day 2 features dancing and reinvigorating of the spirit to wash away 7 generations ago of slavery.
And as we all know, and as we just talked about with reparations, that's just where we are right now. We're in such a state of self-loathing about our past and about what happened before us. And we project that on ourselves now, and we say that these issues are still going on and they're worse than before. Let's ask somebody, who lived back then, is it really worse than before now? Is it really worse than before? That we're an integrated society to where people, to where minorities and African Americans and white people can all go to the same things together. They can enjoy the same events. They eat at the same restaurants. They drink from the same water fountains. They ride the same buses and transportation. They can live in the same housing facilities, despite what you're told. You can work wherever you want. You can go wherever you want to get an education. You have all of these freedoms and these abilities. Is it really worse now than it was 100 years ago?
You would honestly think that.
You would think so.
You would think that we're talking like we're late 1860s, 1870s, and we're in the middle of the Reconstruction, and we're talking about reparations.
Yeah. But it's just all part of this larger thing, and that's just proof positive right now of just what this whole thing is, and what it's not about equality, it's about getting even. And there's a big difference between those two. So, I have a story here. This is from the Washington Times, and Sunday talk shows falter in the ratings is the headline. This was from Thursday. It says, Sunday morning political talk shows have some surprising heritage. It's interesting to note, for example, that NBC's Meet the Press is the nation's longest-running TV show, debuting as a half-hour program on November 6, 1947, and CBS's Face the Nation went on the air 7 years later in 1954, while ABC's This Week debuted in 1981. And it goes on to state that Pew Research Center has tallied the public interest based on industry statistics, and it says the average audience for the network TV Sunday morning political talk shows on ABC, CBS, Fox, and NBC, This Week, Face the Nation, and Meet the Press, respectively, declined 8% in 2018 to about 2.3 million average viewers. And the average audience for the 4 news magazine shows aired by the networks, ABC's 2020, CBS's 60 Minutes, 48 Hours, and NBC's Dateline, declined in 2018, down 8% from 2018. So all of these have declined, both in the news magazine shows, as they call them, for the 4 networks. They're down 8%, and the Sunday morning talk shows for CBS, NBC, and ABC have all declined as well. The average audience for the evening newscast for ABC, CBS, and NBC remained relatively stable in 2018, with 5.3 million viewers tuning in on average, compared with 5.2 in 2017. So you actually saw a small gain, if anything. It remained pretty well stable, could even be just within the realm of error, margin of error. combined advertiser expenditures for the evening broadcast news programs like ABC's World News Tonight, CBS's Evening News, and NBC Nightly News were $518 million in 2018, a 6% decline compared with 2017. So, what this is, let's just talk about the Sunday talk shows here, because it just gives a complete report, just in general, of your prime news stations in terms of the ratings and how they're doing. Sunday morning talk shows are just empty.
I don't watch them.
They're just empty, and that's why their ratings are dropping, because they're all about Trump. And you see sound bites and you see news clips from these programs to where it's just nothing but about Trump all the time. There's no talk of anything else. It's just what Trump is doing every second of every day for every moment.
And honestly, you tune in and you watch Chuck Todd on Meet the Press and you think that you're watching MSNBC.
Yeah.
They're a subsidiary, but at the same time, you don't think that you should be watching something almost the exact same.
Now, I will say that the Sunday morning talk shows are better than most of their, like parent station newscasts and things. I mean, they are much better most of the time, especially with NBC instead of watching MSNBC. I would rather watch NBC than that. But these talk shows are still just reflections of this just overarching hatred for Donald Trump and everything that he does and everything that he is. And you have ABC, which is owned by Disney, and just, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, ESPN said that they were going to try to stop talking about politics. They're both owned by Disney, and ESPN has delved way into the political arena, and they finally realized, through their ratings getting hurt, that people don't like this. They want to hear about sports on ESPN. So
shocker.
Shocker. So they started... they said they were going to start pulling back on that. And, ABC with This Week, it's just another showcase of that. You probably could have watched ESPN and This Week and seen virtually no difference other than the ticker across the bottom and on the side, with headlines about LeBron James or Colin Kaepernick kneeling or something. I don't know. In fact, with that, it probably looked like This Week. But there just is no appeal to this kind of stuff because it's so tiresome, because we've been listening to this since 2015. It was before Trump was ever elected that you've had such a rabid hatred for the man and such rabid news coverage on everything that he does. It's been 4 years now and likely will continue. But the only network that you see actually thriving, actually growing, is Fox. And you wouldn't believe that if you listened to people in Congress and if you watched the other news networks. You would think that Fox is on its way out, it's on its last legs, and it needs to be taken out back to be dealt with. It's not the case. And it's only growing and maintaining the ground that it has worked years to gain. Fox isn't failing. These other networks are. And it's because they have been shown, CNN multiple times throughout the last 3 and 4 years, how they jump the gun on stories or they just outright mislead their audience and don't report the truth. And people see these Sunday talk shows as an outpouring of that and an extension of that.
All right. So I found this fun story from Fox. We were just talking about them, Fox News. And at the time of recording, the women have just won the World Cup.
Yeah.
They beat the Netherlands. So Megan Rapinoe, the captain of the team, she's had some controversy saying that if they win, and they have, that they're not going to the White House, or at least she's not. Mm-hmm. And now she's come out and made the claim that FIFA cares less about the women's league than the men's league because there's a pay gap there between the men's league and the women's league, and the women's game was scheduled the same day as 2 other men's championship games. So she claims because 2 men's championship games were on the same day that I guess it was taking away from the women's day. And she thinks that the women's championship should just have its own day. She blames that, of course, on sexism.
Yeah.
And I give her... The women aren't paid the same as the men, but I don't know if that's sexism or not. That's a whole new argument. The Women's Cup makes 30 million to 60 million as the prize money for the Women's Cup, and the Men's Cup is 440 million.
Yeah, I was gonna say the men's draws more than the women, and without just making a complete slush fund for the both of them. I mean, because I'm not sure how it works. I'm not very versed on soccer, but I imagine even though that it is FIFA, that the women's league and the men's league are 2 totally different entities, and they're just under the same housing and whatnot, but they're 2 totally different things in terms of their organization and their management, everything. All right, so I wanted to break in here from the normal podcast. This is the day after. And there's a story from the Daily Wire that I want to get to from Amanda Prestigiacomo. That was posted, again, just a couple of hours ago. We didn't get as in-depth on this topic as I wanted us to. This was Logan's topic. I didn't really know much about it or what he was even really going to do. But this story, I think, adds a lot more depth than we had in the original podcast. And I thought that it would be good just to add this and cut this in here to give you guys the best information that we can possibly get you. And it's reporting on the aftermath of the U.S. women winning the World Cup yesterday. And it's talking about how after this there's a bar. And it says, during a live Fox News segment on Sunday, Democratic supporters of the U.S. women's soccer team chanted F Trump and bashed racist President Donald Trump following the Women's World Cup victory in France. F Trump, cheering Americans holed up in a France bar chanted at the beginning of a live newscast. Now we need to win in 2020. Democrats, screamed a man wearing an American flag-style hat, later yelling, get that racist out of the White House. Democrats, USA Democrats, another cheering woman shouted. They're very happy, said Fox News reporter Greg Palcott. It's a bit of a political thing, too, as you can see. So what it does is it talks about how, well, their chants, against Trump, and Megan Rapinoe, with her political leanings and the statements that she's made about not going to the White House because of Trump and everything, has kind of overshadowed the whole victory of this event. And also the team, it goes on and says, has protested an alleged gender wage gap in the sport, though men actually get paid a lower percentage of their generated revenue than the women's players. And, this has been something that has been being talked about for now the last little bit, the last couple of days, about equal pay between the men and the women's teams for their sports. And it links to a story, and this is from Forbes, actually, is what it links to from March of this year. And it's revenue disparity explains pay disparity between soccer World Cup women and men. And it's a short little article. I'll just read it all here. News today that France earned $38 million from FIFA for winning soccer's World Cup in Russia, while the women's champion in France this summer will earn just $4 million, has prompted outrage. The total prize money for the Women's World Cup in France this July will be $30 million compared to the total prize money of $440 million for the men's teams at the 2022 World Cup in Qatar. The difference between the men's and women's prize money is ridiculous, said the overseer for FIFA. She said it's really disappointing the gap between the men's and the women's World Cups got bigger. Sends the wrong message. But as Dwight James pointed out, and it links to an article from NBC Sports from 4 years ago, as Dwight James pointed out 4 years ago, after the U.S. women beat Japan to capture the World Cup in Vancouver, there is a big difference in the revenue available to pay the teams. The Women's World Cup brought in almost $73 million, of which the players got 13%. The 2010 Men's World Cup in South Africa made almost $4 billion, of which 9% went to the players. The men still pulled the World Cup money wagon. The Men's World Cup in Russia generated over $6 billion in revenue, with the participating teams sharing $400 million, less than 7% of the revenue. Meanwhile, the Women's World Cup is expected to earn $131 million for the full 4-year cycle from 2019 to 2022 and dole out $30 million to the participating teams. So, I didn't catch that. The women earn a larger percentage of the earnings of the Women's World Cup than the men do on the Men's World Cup. The Men's World Cup makes more, and the men get a lesser percentage. But they still get more because, as a consequence of percentages, mathematical consequence, they make more. They get more. The Men's World Cup makes far more than the women's. But the men get a lesser percentage of that increase. But with mathematical consequences, they still make more than the women. But the women have a larger percentage share of the money that is generated from their league. The men have a smaller percentage share of the money generated by their World Cup. So, what is being protested here, and as we so often see, is a matter of percentages. We see the consequence just of mathematics. And because the dollar figure itself is not the same, then it must be unequal. It must be injustice. Because it's not the exact same. It's not the same total whenever it gets down to the bottom of the page. It's not the same dollar figures. So it must be the result of injustice. It must be because of sexism. It must be because, of this gender wage gap. That's what it must be because it's not the same dollar figure. But it's just a consequence of mathematical percentages and smart money management. The Men's World Cup makes more money than years on top of years of Women's World Cups combined. And let's be totally honest. As it said, the 2010 Men's World Cup in South Africa made almost $4 billion. $4 billion. And for the 4-year cycle from 2019 to 2022, the Women's World Cup is only expected to make $131 million. That is a lot smaller. A lot smaller. The women can be paid the same as men, but the Women's World Cup and the league will cease to exist because they will be bankrupt. There will be no money for them if they pursue this, because they're doing this with FIFA and everything, and the World Cup would cease to exist for the women if they pursued this in any serious manner other than just for publicity and reporting purposes. Other than just trying to make a statement and getting a message out there for publicity. If they actually tried to pursue this, the World Cup, Women's World Cup, would cease to exist. They would be bankrupt immediately. So, again, this is all part of a larger, just overshadowing series of events that's going on with the Women's World Cup, with Megan Rapinoe and her comments about Trump. And now, Trump has said that, we'll see whether or not he invites the women's team to the White House. At this point, the tradition of inviting teams to the White House has just become so embroiled in political turmoil that I think it should be ceased, if I'm being totally honest. Just stop it. Just stop it, because it's all become a political event. And this happened with Obama, too. It happened with Obama. There were people who refused to go to the White House because Barack Obama was president, but nobody reported on that. They only now report on people snubbing the finger and not wanting to go to the White House because of Trump, because it fits their political purposes to attack him. And they can't find a way to beat him in any other way. So they have to take, the little victories that they can get of sports teams not wanting to go to the White House because Donald Trump is president. Truthfully, if it's this big a deal, just cease the practice. Just stop the practice of inviting teams to the White House after they win a national championship in the major American sports. Just stop it. Anyway, so with that, we'll send you back to the normal episode. So I have a story here from the Daily Wire, and this is from yesterday on Saturday from, pardon me if I mispronounced the name, Ash Show from the Daily Wire. Elizabeth Warren says she'll use executive orders to end mythical gender wage gap. And just like it says, this is a bit of an opinion piece, but in a Medium post that was published on Friday, Warren vowed to issue 2 executive orders upon taking office, one aimed at private sector companies seeking federal contracts and the other at diversifying the federal workforce. The first executive order she mentions would impose new rules on companies that hope to receive federal contracts. She would expand existing disclosure requirements to weed out companies with poor track records on diversity and equal pay, meaning companies that don't hire enough people of color may not receive contracts. This may lead to token positions in order to receive contracts. Warren would also ban companies that want federal contracts from using forced arbitration and non-compete clauses that restrict workers' rights and from asking salary history. This executive order would also require federal contractors to pay a $15 minimum wage and benefits such as paid family leave, flexible hours, and collective bargaining rights. So let's go through that. It's a lot to throw at you. Let's kind of digest that a little bit more. So she would expand existing disclosure requirements to weed out companies with poor track records with diversity and equal pay. So companies that don't hire enough people of color, this is like affirmative action, may not receive contracts, federal contracts. Let me see. She would also ban companies that want federal contracts from using forced arbitration and non-compete clauses to restrict workers' rights. So, trying to prevent workers from going to other companies. These companies, their workers sign contracts to where they have to have arbitration and, these non-compete clauses. And she wants to go in there and do away with that, and then also require these contracts to pay a $15 minimum wage and all of these, benefits. So this is the first executive order that she wants for federal contracted companies. This doesn't solve really any problems for most people. This first one, it's just dealing with federal contractors and things to that effect. The second executive order would require that employers direct real resources towards attracting entry-level applicants from HBCUs, tribal colleges and universities, and other minority-serving institutions. Even though Warren herself admitted that black women are disproportionately represented in the federal workforce, she would still impose recruitment policies because there are not enough black women in leadership roles. This executive order would also divert funding toward paid fellowships for minorities who are underrepresented at specific government agencies. In addition, the executive order would require each federal agency to further diversify their workforce and provide mentorship programs to minorities, as if this doesn't currently exist. So, again, what you're doing, this executive order, the second one, would require that employers, and this is in quotes, direct real resources toward attracting entry-level applicants from HBCUs, which is historically black colleges and universities, and tribal colleges and universities.
So this is more pandering?
So, I think so. I think that it's just another issue. It's another token issue that Warren and the left like to talk about, and that is the pay gap between genders and between races. As we talked about at the beginning of the episode with Kamala Harris's plan for the housing. It's all just about pandering. It's all about trying to get these votes and trying to get these people back into the fold. It's just forcing companies to do these things, which just arbitrarily is decided. These numbers that they want to raise these wages to, this $15. Why $15? I don't know. There's probably, articles about how, $15 is what's needed for you to be above the poverty line and everything like that. That's probably their reasoning. But just to arbitrarily force everyone to go to $15 doesn't solve anything. Because guess what? As soon as you do that, guess what? Then the poverty line raises, and then you're back at square one. It doesn't do anything. And then the second one requires that you direct resources for attracting black employees. So it's just like an affirmative action, except it goes a little further for trying to attract entry-level applicants from historically black and tribal colleges and universities and other minority-serving institutions. So, it is like affirmative action in that sense. Affirmative action with, diverting resources for, hiring these black people, and that's basically what it's saying here, that employers will direct toward entry-level applicants, though, now. I'm not sure in terms of affirmative action what all it specified in terms of its requirements, but this is now directed toward entry-level applicants and people fresh out of college.
Well, honestly, I feel like all that Elizabeth Warren is doing is she has put out so many policies and so many things that she wants to do, to whenever a question is raised to her about anything, how do you feel about climate change? Well, I've proposed a climate bill. How do you feel about the gender gap? Well, I've proposed a wage bill.
And that is true also. It's a way to get things under your belt and out there for you to refer to as your position, which everyone does. That's just kind of what you do. You put out your ideas and everything and just kind of lay it out. So if anyone asks, then you can just go, look at this, and move on, next question. And that's what a lot of them do. But, this also, I think it's just pandering. That's what you're seeing a lot of, is just pandering. And Democrats that are running for office are just as guilty of it as some Republicans. And the way that they talk about cutting spending or anything from the Constitution, any sort of rights from the Constitution, defending Second Amendment rights, repealing Obamacare, was the big one in the, in 2010. And how many of them actually fought for that?
Ted Cruz.
But it's kind of the same difference here. It's kind of the same thing. And this is just pandering for this gender and wage gap and, racial wage gap, which whenever you take in the right factors, whenever you actually look at it, that isn't there. And, Show even points this out here before she goes into what Medium posted just a couple days ago on Friday. And she says there is no wage gap. It's an earnings gap between men and women, and due to a variety of factors relating to different career choices between the sexes. When those factors are taken into account, the gap nearly vanishes, and there is no evidence what remains is due to discrimination. But, Warren essentially saying that women, it's women, and specifically black women, and black people who are all disadvantaged to whites and white men is the overarching point that she's making with this. So with that, we will come to our last segment. It's Dots and Dashes, and me and Logan will bring to you a story that's a little different. It's a little more lighthearted than what we talk about through the rest of the program to send you into the next week. So with that, Dots and Dashes. Alright, so welcome to Dots and Dashes, and my story comes from NPR. Surprising as that may seem. And a Texas Longhorn from Alabama just set the Guinness World Record for the longest set of horns on a Texas Longhorn. From tip to tip, they are 10 feet and 7.4 inches long, and it is a 6-year-old Texas Longhorn bull called Pancho Villa, and its spread on its horns is more than twice the width of a concert grand piano. So Pancho Villa is the name of the Texas Longhorn that just broke the Guinness World Record for the longest set of horns on a Texas Longhorn.
Dang.
So that's impressive. That's 11 foot of horn, and we'll put a picture up with it so you can really see the horns on it. It's big. It's huge. The horns on this bull.
Well, speaking of bulls, I got a story. So as you know, the running of the bulls over in Spain is taking place. It's a 9-day festival, and already after day 1, 9 people were injured, including 2 that were gored. So,
and that's the risk that you run with that, and it's widely known over there that it's dangerous, and that there is a high probability that you'll get gored by a bull, and that's just a tradition that they have over there for it's some cultural reason. I can't really remember what it is, but you could. People have gotten really seriously hurt from doing that.
It's not really lighthearted. Maybe it is if you find people getting gored funny.
But so with that, we want to thank you all for joining us on this edition of the WireTap. And we hope that you guys enjoyed your 4th of July holiday. And from whatever platform it is that you're watching, whether it be YouTube or if you're listening to us on SoundCloud, make sure that you leave us comments on topics that maybe you want us to address in the future. Make sure that you like and you share this with whomever you want. If you're watching us on YouTube, go to SoundCloud. You can listen to us on the go. If you're on SoundCloud, go over to YouTube, watch us. See us in our little bunker over here. Make sure you like, subscribe, follow, the whole deal. And if you want to see more of our content in between podcasts throughout the week, we are very active on Twitter at the C-Wire, capital TCNW. It's at the C-Wire on Twitter. There's links to all of it down in the description, and we will see you guys in the next episode.